What's up, you guys? Welcome to episode 34 of the show. I am Jennie O'Connor, and I help multi-passionate creatives slay imposter syndrome so they can grow their influence and self-promote without feeling slimy. If you are already subscribed, thank you to infinity and beyond. And if you are just tuning in for the first time, please smash that subscribe button because I've got more of the Courage series coming up for you because there is just so much stuff to dig into when it comes to living a more courageous, vivacious, get in the arena and get your hands dirty kind of life. So if that's the kind of life you want for yourself, stick with me, kid, and we will get there together. Today I am super excited because we are talking to someone who has broken a very big rule. And as you know, we are not big fans of rules around here. So of course I immediately wanted to meet her and request her presence on the show. Liesel K is a USA Today best-selling author. She is also the creator of the prolific author system for writing fiction and founder of the Fiction Author Business Academy. She loved to read and write at a young age, but she didn't take the most direct route to where she is now, which is writing stories of dragons, serial killers, and epic history. When she's not writing, she's teaching others how to write, market, and sell, build fiction empires, and make a living off of their author royalties. This one is for all of my everything enthusiasts out there who want to write about a lot of different things. The good news is you can. So let's do this. Liesel, hello. How are you today?
I'm great. How are you doing, Jennie?
I'm wonderful. Thank you. I am so glad to have you here on the show. Thank you for being here. I'm excited to dig into all things writing with you.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks for having me. I'm glad to be here.
Yeah, of course. So I want to actually back things up for a little bit. I first discovered you on Adam Shibley's Pod Pals, one of the many episodes that he did, a Pod Pals episode. Right. And you said something obviously that triggered the in-depth research that I do on people that I decide I want to have on the show. And I made some assumptions about your everything enthusiast tendencies or lack thereof, which is sort of ironic because I just did an episode about never making assumptions. So do as I say, not as I do. But I kind of decided that whether or not you were an everything enthusiast, I knew that you still had something to teach my audience because you have broken a very big rule. And so as children, we were taught all kinds of things and we just sort of accept them because they come from grownups. One of those is for multi-passionate people, you have to choose one thing and specialize in it if you want to be a success. Right? But another one of those is if you want to be a successful writer, you have to choose one genre and then stay in your lane.
Right.
And that's the one that you have just been like, nope, I am not doing that. And so I knew that you would have a lot that would be really valuable for the people in my audience who do aspire to be a writer like myself. But I guess that brings us to the all-important question. Do you consider yourself a multi-passionate everything enthusiast?
I do. I really like that term, and it's not one that I've actually applied to myself very much, but I always just say I'm very eclectic, and I just kind of do jump around between things a lot. So even in every aspect of my life, I used to work at a job where I did a lot of receiving during the day, receiving a product. And I would have to initial or cross something off. And I used different colors of pen, and it bothered me to use the same color of pen for every single day. So I had this rainbow of colors, and I just got laughed at all the time for that. But I mean, it's just kind of one, the way that you can kind of see that in me, that I like different things and a combination of different things rather than just one thing. I get bored really easy. So yeah, I think that definitely you can see that in the genres that I write. I love so many different genres, and I'm someone that if I love it, I have to write something in it. You know what I mean? I can't leave it alone.
Yeah.
So
yeah,
that's
and
definitely
it speaks
something
to
that
me
I
as the I wanted to write horror, and I wanted to write self-development, and I wanted to write memoir, and those are all over the place. So I'm glad to hear that the preliminary assumptions I made about you were somewhat correct.
Yes.
And I think I also got that because you went to school to be a doctor, right?
I started to. I didn't actually follow that all the way through school. I took several semesters of pre-med before I really wasn't into it. I mean, it's really kind of interesting because I really wanted to be a doctor in theory, and I really liked the science of it. But during science classes, I would start making up stories with science background in my head and stop paying attention to what I was actually supposed to be doing. And I got really bored with a lot of the clinical stuff and things like that. So I did several semesters of it before I finally let it go. I do tend to be very tenacious. And so I'm stubborn. It took me a while to let it go. But the interesting thing was that once I switched over to English, I probably met a dozen other students who had a very, very similar experience there. I remember there was one I was good friends with who was going to go into pharmacy, which is a little bit different than actually being a doctor. And there were just different people. And I was going, man, I wonder why that happens. But I think it's just a certain type of personality or mind who we kind of have these really romantic notions about doctoring, and we genuinely do want to help people and connect with people. And so we think that's how it's going to be done, but our brain just won't let us do it that way. So we have to turn more to our right brain, to our creative side. And that's where we finally find everything clicks for us, you know?
Absolutely. Do you think that any of this has to do with the idea that art is self-indulgent?
How do you mean? I mean, yeah, but
like,
I'm not sure.
I think that was yet another one of those messages. Like as a doctor, like there is no doubt that you are helping people, but you might question that if you decide to pursue an artistic career.
Right. So you mean, that's a message we get in our society, is that
absolutely that is, I don't believe is correct, but I wonder if that's why people start out going towards the sciences because they have this innate desire to help, but then they realize it's just not what's going to fulfill them.
Right. Yes, I absolutely do agree. And it's interesting because I think that that's something that's been said in our society, and it does come from somewhere. It comes from the myth of the starving artist, that if you're going into anything artsy, you're just not going to make very much money. People think of like Van Gogh and people who never made a lot of money in their time. And certainly the right brain stuff doesn't automatically funnel you toward a whole lot of money, but it's also incorrect that you have to be a starving artist. You just have to learn how to monetize it and how to make a living off of it. So it becomes sort of a mashup of your right and left brain, the right brain being the creative side and left brain being more of the marketing business side. But if you can figure that out, or, there's a lot of artists too who don't want to figure it out, so they hire someone to handle that for them, and that's fine too. But yeah, I think it comes from this myth of the starving artist. And the interesting thing is that now in our current society, there are plenty of more left brain professions who are not making very good money. And there are plenty of people who are doing more creative things like writing or, whatever your creative pursuit is, who make a whole lot more money than doctors do. So it's just something that you have to keep in mind. But it is a myth that has been perpetuated. And I'm sure that has a lot to do with that mindset, as you said.
Yeah. Yeah. I have sort of been teaching that sales, if you see sales as a way to help people, that it makes sales feel a lot less gross.
Right.
And I know that spinning that for an artistic pursuit, when you come to that help statement, is a little bit more difficult. So I think that just a lot of people are funneled into the sciences because it's just this like easy, here's how I'm going to help. And it's a little bit harder to figure that out once you figure out that you have to do art, or you'll just like wither and die inside, which is what it sounds like from your story was sort of what happened to you. And it took, you said a couple semesters. Like how much time did you quote unquote waste?
Well, the funny thing is I was thinking about both since I was in high school. I've always been a bookworm. I've always had my nose in a book. I've always written stories on the sides. I had as early as grade school, I had teachers sending me to writing conferences because they would see me writing things and they picked up on that, And so I always wanted to do it. But then when I was in, junior high or high school, I decided that I wanted to go into the medical profession. And so I just kind of kept myself focused on that. And it wasn't a big deal in junior high and high school. I think I took an EMT class, and that was fun and that was interesting. And but it really wasn't my whole life's course at that point. It wasn't until I got into college that I really, really had to make a decision. But I was always thinking in my mind that I would become a doctor, but write books on the side or something like that. I don't know why, in what world I thought I could do both, because both are very, very, very time consuming. But that's just naivety. And so it was probably, I don't remember exactly how long, but it was 2, maybe 3 semesters that I was still taking pre-med courses. And I was doing general ed too. So I was in college for a while. It took me, I I want to say 5 or 6 years to get my BS, but I mean, at the same time, there was other reasons for that too. Once I decided to switch my major and become an English major, I took several semesters off, like not all at once, but here and there to try and get writing done. So it just kind of, took longer than it would have otherwise. But yeah, I think, I don't even know that I'd call it wasted time, because some of my stories that I've written have come out of those medical classes. So if I hadn't had them, I wouldn't have the back catalog that I do now.
Sure.
So I don't consider it a waste, but it did take me a while to figure out what my central focus was going to be, and once I did, it just made all the difference,
Yeah, that's why I put it in air quotes, because for multi-passionate people, none of your pursuits are a waste of time, because they inform your other pursuits always,
Right.
And you connect dots in ways that, I mean, clearly, if you're writing about these science-based things from time to time, like it absolutely served a purpose.
Yeah.
But sometimes it could be viewed that way from the outside or whatever.
Right.
You also love to bake, right?
Mm-hmm.
Would you consider that a hobby or a passion?
A little of both. I mean, in terms of, I'm not making money on it. So in that sense, it's a hobby, but I did put myself through school by working in food service. I worked in a deli actually, and under a really talented chef for a long time. And she taught me a lot. So I still love to bake, and I think I am passionate about it. But the other fun thing is that I have an email list as a writer. What do I send out weekly or monthly emails? And I actually, it's not so much baking that I put into it, but I always do national foodie holidays and talk about them, and sometimes give them recipes. And I get people who love that, who will send me recipes and talk to me about things. And so it actually has helped me to cultivate my email list as well.
It's interesting how alluring those posts are. One of my many jobs was, I was a private chef and a boutique caterer in LA for many years. And so I sometimes will just drop a recipe in amongst my other content, and people are always more excited about that than anything else. So I can totally relate to that. What do you think really distinguishes a hobby from a passion, just in your own words? Like what's the difference?
Yeah, that's an interesting question. I think to a certain extent, it's the amount of attention that you give to it. If it's just a hobby, it's something you kind of do on the side and don't really care how fast you're going or how much progress you make. It's just something to noodle around with. But once you've moved beyond that, given it a lot more time and attention, and maybe even put in your 10,000 hours so that you're really, really good at it. Because I could say I don't cook a lot anymore. I don't bake a lot. I do for, of course, family parties and things like that, but it's not something I do day in and day out and think a whole lot about. But I have done so much of it in the past that I can sit down or I can take an hour and make something, and people will think that it's like this master recipe. I'm like, no, I just kind of threw this together. But it's because I have in the past had so much passion for it and spent so much time learning it, and hours and hours and hours, kind of trying to perfect that craft. So I don't know that it qualifies as a hobby anymore, even though I'm not actively pursuing it in a huge way. So I don't know. It's an interesting question. I think it's a kind of a continuum.
Yeah, I completely agree with you. And I asked because, like, for me, I think the passion is I couldn't live out the rest of my days without this in it. At least a little. And I mean, some people might just feel that way about a hobby, but for me, if part of me would wither and die without this little piece, then that to me is a passion. So I was just curious about your thoughts on it, and we're sort of in sync with there. So let's talk about the three. It's three, I believe, different genres that you write in, right?
Yeah. You could call it four, but I have 3 pen names, so it's really officially 3. So I write historical fiction and crime, which is not cozy. It is gritty serial killer kind of crime. Yeah. And then fantasy and sci-fi. And it's within sci-fi and fantasy, I actually kind of do both. So I'm currently working on a high fantasy, which is like a dragon medieval kind of thing. And then I've also got a dystopian, which is a little bit more science fiction and, what do you call it? Technology kind of stuff. So
you are also intrigued by the dark side of humanity. Yeah. And it's the whole Walking Dead commonality that we have between each other.
Right.
I regularly refer to people like us would be super useful in a zombie apocalypse.
Yes.
Because I'm obsessed with Walking Dead, but I sort of think along those terms, Yeah. So I love that you have a fascination for that. Did you, as a child, or whenever you first started really getting into writing regularly, hear that rule that you needed to pick one and stick with it?
Yes. Especially the biggest thing about that is that things have changed so much in the last 20 years. In the old, what they call traditional publishing model, that was generally the rule. You had to pick one genre, and your publisher, your publishing company, would not publish anything else by you under a different genre. Mm-hmm. So it was possible to, create a pen name and maybe go with a different publisher, but people would not know that that was the same author. They would think they were different authors completely. And even then, some contracts that you signed would say you were not allowed to put out another book with another publisher, that sort of thing. So most people did not really have that option. And back then, self-publishing was just not a thing. I mean, self-publishing was going to the printer and getting a book bound and passing it around to your family. And that was pretty much it. It was really hard. But with the advent of Amazon and the rise of digital, everything, this revolution we've had, it's just really, really different. You do generally, if you want to make really good sales and stay in line with the algorithms to sell books well, you still have to create different genres under different pen names. And it's important to note that not everybody does that. There are people who have multiple genres under one pen name, but it's getting harder and harder to sell them organically that way. Mm-hmm. So that's why I have the 3 different pen names. Originally, I had at least 2 genres under one pen name. And then when I started the third, I went, okay, I gotta get organized here. And so that's when I kind of decided how I was going to do it and divided it up. But yeah, I definitely have heard that. And it's still, there's truth in it in the sense that if you're trying to market and write several different genres at once, it takes a lot longer to get traction and to build up your backlist on all 3 different genres and pen names and to really start to see sales. So it's not that there isn't truth in that, but people just, if they want to do it, they absolutely can. I'm proof of that. You just have to kind of, make sure that your expectations are realistic.
Yeah. How did you were like, it doesn't matter. I have to do this. I have to write about all of these different interests and I'm just going to make it work. Is that how
yeah, pretty much. Because I would hear that and I'd go, well, I understand, but I have all these stories I want to write and I just can't imagine not writing them. So I might as well, and at the time, if I'm not making a whole bunch of money on my book catalog anyway, I might as well write what I want and just start, building things out. And just work from there. When stories came into my head, I had a few that came in. Let's see, the first one I wrote was my historical fiction, which was Kremlins. And I was actually finishing the first book of that as I was graduating college. And then I had the idea for the second one. And it was one of those things where there were several ideas floating around, but they all kind of came together. And so I wrote that one next, which was the sci-fi one. And then the first crime novel I had, it was one of these things that it was almost like a Harry Potter thing. It came together all at one time and I just had it all at once and I had to write it down. And the first book wasn't very long. It was just barely long enough to be considered a novel rather than a novella. But I wrote it in like a week because I just I have to sit down and get this written. And I did, so wow. When that sort of thing happens. And then when you have a story, why would you not put it out there for people to read,
Of course. Yeah. So you have built up an audience. Do you find, or do you think that they are confused ever, or they're just with you?
No, I think they're just with me. So the way that I segment my newsletter in terms of different genres.
Do? Oh, cool.
Yes,
Tell me about
I also have a catch-all. So I mostly onboard people onto my list based on the genre that they want. I'll offer them a free book based on the genre they like. But then in my onboarding sequence, I have an email that says, by the way, I write these other genres under these other pen names. If you like that genre and would like to join one of those other lists, you can do so here. So they can join multiple lists. And if they don't read those other genres, they don't have to. I also have a catch-all list so that if they're on all of the genres, they're not receiving 4 different emails and it's just my all genres email. And I have a lot of people on there who will read cross-genre, whatever I write. So, I think they can keep track of things pretty well. If they have problems, they can email me. And anyone who's not on the list probably doesn't even know that I write multiple genres. They just read the one that they like, So I don't get a whole lot of confusion from my readers in that.
That's so smart to segment like that. And so it probably takes a little bit of extra work to set up on the back end, but then you know, exactly that. Your people aren't getting things they don't want. They're just getting what they do. And I love this. I love that they're with you. That you have so many people that are I just want to read what you write. It doesn't matter what genre it's in. That's really cool because I think that that is the proof that rule is antiquated and that we can kind of toss it out, that
right. Yeah, I agree.
Your people are your people regardless. So that's super cool. So I tried to figure out how many novels you had written by going to your website and it was my brain exploded a little bit. Do you know off the top of your head how many it is?
want to say I have 17 that are out.
Gosh. Oh my gosh.
But I have like 3 that I've been trying to put out all year, and I've been working on my academy. So my writing has taken a little bit of a back burner. So I will have, I'm always working on stuff. I have plenty more to come. So I want to say it's 17. I should probably know that.
No, it's funny. I often ask people on the show, how many books have you written? And they're like 5, 6, like, so I honestly didn't necessarily expect you to know. I just knew it was a lot. So you are indeed a prolific writer, which happens to be the name of your podcast.
Yeah.
So perfectly appropriate. I've been enjoying it so much, by the way.
Okay.
I wanted to tell you.
Thank you.
So share with my readers then, how do you write so fast? What is the method that you use?
It is all about processes, and shifting your mindset to sort of compartmentalize is a good word, but also just in a way to give yourself distance from the process. When you explain this, it sounds kind of like a negative thing, but we as human beings actually do this, especially for negative circumstances. So if we get some bad news, or somebody, insults us or does something that's mean to us, we tend to kind of go, well, whatever, I don't care. They can do whatever they want. You know what I mean? And that's distancing us from the emotions of that thing, which is, of course, at some point you're going to have to deal with it, but it's also a way of coping. And so it actually protects us a little bit. And so I kind of try to get my students to do that with the writing process, in the sense that when we first start writing, we think, I have this whole book to write. I have all these characters, I have all these storylines, 100,000 words, and it becomes so overwhelming. And then we don't want to do it. We create processes in our brain that this is negative, this is hard, this is going to be really difficult. And then we can't get past that. Okay. So I teach them, if you can see it all in front of you in one great big sort of master plan, but it's all written for you in like bullet points on a paper, then you can break it down and it doesn't seem so scary. It's just like, okay, I just got to go through and do this, this, and this. And then you start to be able to do it faster. So I do have whole processes. I actually dictate rather than typing, which is a personal preference. Some people type, some people dictate, some people do both. But I have gotten to a point where I can dictate about 5,000 words in an hour. And then I can usually, if I'm really focused, I can get that edited into pretty decent form in about 2 to 3 hours. So like I said, my writing has definitely taken a bit of a back burner this last year because I've been working on other things, but I want to get to the point again where I'm doing that at least, even if you're doing it 3 times a week, you're getting 15,000 words a week written. If you can do it every day, 5 days a week, that goes up to 25. And I know people who write 10,000 words a day who do a lot more than I do. So it's just a matter of figuring out your process. And then the other thing is, people say, oh, I could never do that. I could never write 5,000 words in a day. I try to get them away from saying they can't. You absolutely can train your brain to do anything you want it to do. Mm-hmm. It does take time. I have a whole process inside my academy where I say, okay, start where you are, just increase by like 100 words or a couple of minutes a day, so you're not overwhelming your brain. But over time, you get used to that habit, and then you can increase it, just like anything else, just like learning to run or learning to lift weights or anything like that, learning to read a book. Some people don't read every day and it's hard for them, but if you read a paragraph every day and then 2 paragraphs and then a page, then you get to the point where it's fine. And so it's the same thing. I just teach them to slowly build up and, fit it in with their day. If they're still working a job 8 to 5, maybe they can only write 2 days a week. That's fine, but you can still grow that habit, and then get to a point slowly where you can really churn out books. And if you outline correctly and make sure that you're hitting everything you need to hit so that you're not just churning out for the sake of speed, you can actually churn out really high quality books really quickly. But it does take time and effort and practice.
Yeah. That's all such good advice. And I actually just was listening to the episode about your own writing process, and I love that it had never occurred to me to dictate it. So I just downloaded Otter onto my computer so that I can try.
Nice.
It's a bit clunky in my own process right now, but I hope to get to somewhere close to your status at some point. 5,000 words, that's impressive. I definitely have a long way to go, but I thought that was genius. I was like, it's so much easier for me to, think out loud than to type. So that, of course, that would make you more prolific. I love that. How do you have any like time management tips that you utilize?
Yeah, I'm a big fan of making sure that you're taking regular breaks. I know that for me, it's the kind of thing that you're really kind of oblivious to during the day. You can be working and working and working and not realize that you're not taking breaks because you just have so much to do. But then by the end of the day, you're burnt out. And by the end of the week, you don't want to work anymore. And on the other hand, what I do is I usually try to set a timer for 50-minute intervals and then take 10 minutes out of every hour. And a lot of times I just walk around, go to the bathroom, go to the kitchen, come back, sit down. I mean, it doesn't have to be a big deal, but it can be if you want to take an hour break and go walking or do errands or, whatever you want to do. But doing that really definitely helps. It helps manage your time into small segments, which is what we talked about before. Making small segments rather than an 8-hour day is much easier for your brain to grasp. And it also just keeps you from getting burnt out and from getting too exhausted with your work,
Yeah. And if you're writing, you can't get burnt out. Like if you forget to eat or something, you get to a point where your brain just stops. Right. So that's so important. And that's a thing that I actually need to hear, because I am really bad at managing my energy in that way. Like it'll be 6 hours in front of the computer and I'll realize I haven't eaten anything. And by then my brain has turned off. So but it's not for you about like starting first thing in the morning. You just do these 50-minute intervals kind of throughout the day. And that works for you.
Yeah. I do try to get whatever is going to be my biggest task, which is usually writing. I usually try to get that done first thing in the morning, especially the dictation part, because that's the part that takes the most brain power for me. But there are plenty of days when I just can't do that because I have other things scheduled. And so then I will just try to move it to some other part of the day. And I mean, the worst that usually happens is either I don't get it done that day, or if I do, it takes longer because I've already used so much energy that, when I'm really on the ball, I just kind of whip it out for an hour and I'm good. And then other times, of course, you have the days where you're really struggling to find the words, you're tripping over your tongue, you're getting frustrated. Sure. So I do try to, I think it's important that whatever you sit down and figure out whatever is going to take the most energy and try to get that done first. But, it's not always possible too. So just do the best you can.
Yeah, absolutely. So to be as prolific as you are, I feel like anyone in an artistic pursuit wrestles with imposter syndrome. Why would anyone listen to me? And I mean, at 17 books in, maybe that's gone away for you, but that had to exist for you at first, right? Like yes. How did you conquer that? Because you clearly have, and I'm just inspired by like, you shut that voice off. So tell me how you've done that.
If you're not somebody there are some people who can just do it at the drop of a hat and it's not a big deal for them because they're fairly confident people. If you're not somebody who can do that, I think the biggest way that you're going to be able to get rid of it is just to push through and keep going, because you'll find that little by little over time, just, for me, by fact of writing a book that people liked, and they're going, no, this is a good story. We like these characters. That helped, you know what I mean? And it didn't make it go away altogether, but the more you do that, the more it goes away. Another thing that really helped me too is there's an author named Clint Johnson, who I have met several times, and he does presentations. We end up at the same conferences because we live in the same area. And he calls it the inevitability of disappointment. And as my left brain, my logical side, when I consider this, it really helps me with imposter syndrome. He talked about how, and he'll go into really a lot of detail about processes in the brain and kind of scientific things, which I won't go into, but the basic gist is that anytime we have a new idea, it doesn't have to be new to the world, just new to us, we tend to get really excited about it. There's some chemical processes that happen in our brain that create endorphins, and we get like this rush of excitement about it. And then at some point, we kind of come down off that high. So sometimes it happens immediately, and sometimes it'll happen 6 months down the road. And it's not even so much that the chemical process creates a down energy. It's just that compared to that euphoria we originally have, it feels like a down energy. And so what this manifests, at least in writers, is when we have an idea for a book and we're like, oh, that's a cool idea. And 2 minutes later, we're like, never mind, that's stupid. You know what I mean? Like, well, that's that process that's what's happening there. But a lot of times you can work on a book for 6 months, and then 6 months in, you'll suddenly get this, oh my gosh, I've been working on this 6 months. What if everyone hates it? Kind of a thing.
Yeah, this isn't an original idea. What am I doing?
Right. Yeah. And all he says is that's totally normal. It's part of the creative process. You just got to push through it. So every time I feel imposter syndrome, I just go, okay, this is normal. Everybody goes through this. I just got to keep going. I just like to say, I tell the inevitability of disappointment to go to hell, and then I just keep writing. It's really the only way to push through it.
Yeah. That's really smart. That like to just know that this is part of the process. Mm-hmm. It happens to everybody,
and accept it. Don't push back against it. Just accept it and be like, okay, this is how I'm feeling. That's okay. And
right.
absorb
Right.
it.
Yeah. Have you read Big Magic by Liz Gilbert?
I have not.
Okay. It's this beautiful like book about the creative process essentially, but it's so much for her about not waiting for inspiration to strike because
Uh-huh.
that's because if you wait for inspiration to strike, it will once in a while, but you just won't get anything done. It is showing up to do the work, whether the muse has arrived or not. So very
Well, and
much.
the other thing that we like to say in writing too, there's a really good quote from, I want to say Madeline L'Engle, but I'm not positive. She says something, and I'm probably going to mess it up, something about how the water won't flow until the tap turns on. So a lot of times you have to get started in order to get that inspiration. It's really not going to come until you get started. And a lot of authors find that they can outline to their heart's content and not be happy with it. But the second they start typing or dictating or, kind of relaxing their brain and thinking about it, then all of a sudden all these ideas and inspiration comes. And that is actually one thing that I teach as well, because people always say, how do you get past writer's block? How do you get past when you're trying to think of something and it's not coming? Well, that is also a brain process, because anytime that you're trying to force the muse, your brain just seizes up and it won't let anything come. And that's why, like, how people talk about how their best ideas come in the shower, or they'll go on a walk and figure out what they were trying to figure out for 3 days. It's because you're relaxing your brain. You don't even realize you're doing it. But when you're sitting there trying to force the idea, going, what's it going to be? I got to figure it out. You're not going to be able to figure it out. But if you just sort of relax your brain, let the ideas flow, that's when all the inspiration comes. And a lot of times you have to just get started, not knowing exactly what the end product is going to look like. In order to do that, you just have to start. And then all of a sudden you'll get this huge influx of ideas and lots of inspiration.
Yeah. Yeah. I love that. I mean, that's essentially what Liz Gilbert is saying. Is like, if you are willing to show up every day and put in the work, that's when the big magic happens. The muse will visit you because you are doing that. You are in the trenches, and so, yeah, that's you're teaching the same method, just you're using different words.
Yeah.
So that brings me to, since on the subject of reading, how do you obviously read, we're all as writers meant to do that too. How do you find time for that? Do you listen to audiobooks, or what's your?
I do. I listen to audiobooks. A lot of times it's just about scheduling it in my day. I find time, like if I say, okay, from this hour to this hour, I'm going to read, no matter what. I won't say that I do it every day. There are plenty of times that I don't get around to it, but by scheduling it like that, I get around to it pretty regularly. The other thing that I do, I can't remember who I learned this from. All smartphones now have what's called speak screen on them, which means that there's a way to, it's for the hearing, or for the sight impaired, so that they can have what is on the screen be read to them. It's not a very great voice. It's kind of like that really robotic, what they used to use for old answering machines. That's kind of what it sounds like. So it's not as good as actually buying a dramatized audiobook. But what I do is, when I'm just reading an ebook on my phone, I will have the speak screen read to me. And if I can, I will also read it on the page, if I'm not doing anything else. And you can turn up the speed. So both on those and on podcasts, I'm to the point where I listen to everything on double speed. So it's really, really fast, but I've been doing it so long that my brain actually absorbs it better at that speed. If I slow it down, my brain gets bored and I end up spacing out and not paying attention. So other people hear that and they're like, is that English? How are you hearing that? But it's just something that
it's like chipmunks.
Yeah, it really is. But I mean, you can usually move up gradually. You can go 1.1, 1.2, 1.5, and just sort of move up. So because of that, I can absorb things a lot faster.
Wow.
And so like in an hour, I can actually get a lot read, so that's another thing that I use to try and get through things quickly.
Yeah, you are truly a multi-potentialite, because those synapses firing at a faster speed is like another thing that we seem to have in common. Although I don't know that I could listen to anything at double speed. That sounds a little bit crazy making. But so you value the reading part in terms of informing your process as well. So you try, if you can, fit it into every day.
Yes.
Yeah.
It's really valuable for writers to read in both the genres that they write, but also in any genre, because you can still get inspiration from other genres. And then as an entrepreneur, it's really valuable for me to read kind of nonfiction entrepreneurial kind of books to help me on the business side of things. So yeah, definitely it's an invaluable, without reading, I would most definitely not be where I am today. So
yeah, it's critical. I completely agree. Do you have a favorite on the craft or the entrepreneurial aspects of it?
I don't know that I have one favorite.
or a couple?
Yeah, well, I mean, I could name dozens of books. On writing craft, let's see. There's StoryGrid is really good on writing craft for fiction. And I really like story engineering. And of course, there's the writer's journey, which is kind of it's Joseph Conrad, or not Joseph Conrad, Joseph Campbell, say the right Joseph. It's his hero's journey, but it was kind of updated by Vogler for the current day. And he kind of uses Hollywood movies as examples. And now a lot of people are getting into the Virgin's Promise or the heroine's journey, because that's more of the inner, where the writer's journey is more the outer. And I actually teach both. That a lot of writers tend to, people who are natural readers tend to be natural writers. And so most of them do include some sort of internal arc for their character that, we kind of know it's pretty well known that the character needs to change, but they don't purposely really pay attention to it and purposefully craft it. And so I teach that really heavily and just say, make sure that you're not glossing over this or forgetting this. But of course, the plot, the outer, is also very, very important. So I teach both for that. And I read a lot of books on craft. I've read, I think, most of them at this point.
Yeah. I figured you had, especially since you're teaching it. So talk to me about like your coaching. What sort of services do you provide?
So I have it's called the Prolific Author course. And it's actually not open right now, but it'll be open in the next month or so. I'm going to be opening the doors again. I teach people to write, to market, and to get sales on their books. So we go through all of it. We go through everything from start to finish, like setting up your email list and getting email addresses, because that's going to end up being your biggest marketing asset. We teach, the actual craft of writing. It's kind of funny because like so many things, people don't think they actually need help in the writing part. They think that they just need help with the marketing and the selling. But there are a lot of people out there who, let's put it this way. This is the way that I always explain it. The people who don't think they need craft help are the people who are uploading books to Amazon that are not selling. And that really should kind of say it all. We just like anything else that we would go to school for or learn on the job for, we need to learn the craft of writing if we really, really want to be successful at this. So I teach the craft, and then I teach different kinds of marketing, ways that you can do it without spending money. But then also I've got some ads modules. So people who want to do Amazon or Facebook ads. And then after that, it's totally optional, but people who take the course have the option to remain in the membership. It's called the Fiction Author Business Academy, or you can call it FABA. And that's like a low monthly fee just to continue to be in there and network with other authors. And I do coaching in there and training and hot seats, and can help people, more specifically with their stories, that sort of thing. So.
Oh, that sounds amazing. And so comprehensive, it's so exciting. So is this for people that want to go, the traditional publishing route or the self-publishing route, or both?
I focus on self-publishing.
Okay.
People who want to go traditional could still get a lot of value out of it, especially from the craft part and from marketing on their side. It's kind of a misconception that if you go the traditional publishing route, they're going to do all the marketing for you. That's actually not true. They'll do, what they actually do is more of the production of the book. So a lot of times they'll do the editing for you, and then they will create the cover and the blurb and kind of the paperback edition and that sort of thing. But they will still expect you to do a lot of marketing. So the only difference, I guess, at this point that I would see between a traditional published and a self-published is that you're not the one actually hitting publish. The company will do that, and they will, like I said, create the cover and everything. But all of the marketing and all of the craft you still need. So yeah, I definitely have an emphasis on self because, again, with the digital revolution and how things have changed, traditional publishing is not as good for the author as it used to be. It used to be the only route you could take. And now it's not that everybody clearly who's doing self-publishing is making all kinds of money, but most people who are really going to commit to it and do it right and learn how to do it, they're going to end up making much more money on their own than going through a traditional publisher. So that's why I kind of put an emphasis on that.
Interesting. I knew it was no longer looked down upon as it once was, because so many people are taking it very seriously and putting out top quality books. In fact, one of my mentors went the self-publishing route, and the book blew up, and he was just like, I am proof. Yeah. And the caveat, I think, to traditional publishing these days is that they want you to have a huge audience. So the marketing stuff that you're teaching is important to someone, even if they want to go that route, because they have to show up with something in the first place. Right. I'm kind of amazed at the sort of audience they want you to have.
Yeah.
when you're an unpublished author.
Yeah.
It's a bit daunting, to be honest, which is what makes the self-publishing route, I think, so much more digestible for people nowadays. Yeah. So that's really cool. So you mentioned that one of the things that up-leveled your writing was joining a group. And you said as an introvert, I am also an introvert that just masquerades as an extrovert, but I absolutely am. I love being alone and I never get lonely and I don't really need people or sometimes enjoy them very much. Like I hear you 100% on that. But that can be a little maybe intimidating for people. You said it's pretty necessary. Yeah.
I mean, we all have blinders on as human beings for something, right? And so as authors, we're always going to have blinders on for our writing. And there's something about just using other people as kind of a springboard for ideas and for what you're doing. It's a collaboration and it's just invaluable. I mean, most of my group, we've been together since college, or at least for several years, a few people that joined later. And I mean, we know each other really well, and it's affected my writing so much because it's improved it so much by talking to them, getting ideas from them. I know that if all of them come to me with one paragraph and say, this doesn't make sense, then, that's not going to make sense to everyone. And I need to fix that. And so it's almost like a checks and balances sort of thing, because I know that if I workshop a book through the group, it's safe to put it out for other readers. If I haven't done that, then there might be a lot of mistakes in there that I didn't catch, you know what I mean? Or things that aren't going to go over well in the story. But if I had workshopped it through my group, then I would know that. And I could either fix it or take it out or, whatever the case may be. But we really do help each other a lot. And we aren't afraid to give each other ideas and be like, okay, well, what if you went in this direction with your story? Or what if the character did that? And of course, it's up to the author. They don't have to take any suggestions, and nobody's offended if our suggestion doesn't get taken. And of course, you have to approach it that way. If you approach it with I'm going to be insulted over every little thing, then it's not going to work very well for you.
You have to have a thick skin. I know.
Yeah. So, but I really do highly recommend it, because it also kind of plays into like the whole 10,000 hours thing. If you're editing other people's work and you're receiving edits on your work and you do that every single week for several years, you're going to be a fantastic writer, because you're just going to absorb it all. And the things that they get you on, like words you use too often or the way you do your sentences too much, you will fix those over time and not do them anymore. So it's a way of kind of forcing yourself to learn the craft through experience, which is always a better teacher than the classroom is, and so it's just, I don't know. I don't know how to recommend it highly enough. It's really transformed my writing. And I've even seen, there was a woman who joined our group, more than a year ago, and started workshopping her story. And she had been done writing in college, but it had been a few years and she was coming back to it. And she workshopped a chapter. And I remember that it just needed a lot of work. And then like a year later, she sort of workshopped it again. Like she was kind of revamping the story and she'd rewritten a lot of it. And I like put those two side by side and I could not believe the difference, how much she had improved.
Wow.
I mean, it was amazing, and it was just from showing up week in and week out to do the work. That was the only thing she did. And she's kind of an amazing writer now,
Wow. That's incredible. Yeah. Because I mean, I know that we, and especially as introverts, can see this as something we can do on our own. But what I hear from you now is that like, there still needs to be a collaborative process somewhere in there, because we have those blinders on. You found your group from like the writing classes you were taking in college?
Yeah. It started out with people I knew from classes in college, but there have been other people brought to the group that I didn't know as well who've come in. If people want to find a group, I think one of the easiest ways to do it is to go into groups in Facebook. There's Facebook groups for everything now. There's hundreds of writing groups, and just put it out there. Say, hey, I'm looking for critiquers or a critique group that would be willing to meet once or twice a month. And you'll be able to find people if you just kind of reach out and keep looking.
I love it. That was what I was going to ask you. That is a great tip. Thank you so much. Because back in the day, it was a bit of a challenge to find a critique group. And the one that I was in was like really large. So we would get 100 emails a day. And it was just this overwhelming thing that was super hard for me to manage. Do you have like a size limit on yours?
Yeah, we, the most I think we've ever had is 5 people. Okay. Right now we have 4, and there's a few that kind of drift in and out, just kind of life will let them come in for a while and then they'll leave again. And that's fine. It also depends on how much work you want to do and how often. We meet every single week. And I remember being told by professors in college that was too much. They're like, oh, well, that's fine for now, but you're going to probably want to, pare that down a little bit and only meet once a month. And we never have. We meet every single week. And anyone who wants to send a chapter, of course, there are weeks people don't, get around to sending chapters, but we could have up to 4 or 5 chapters per week to critique. And that's an extra workload. That's extra. And so you don't want to have too many people, or if you do, you might want to say 2 people send each week, that sort of things, so that you're not doing quite as much.
Yeah, that could be a whole other job.
Right. It really could. But like I said, if you can, I can usually get the chapters done in an hour or 2 a week, even if everyone sends. And so that's just, again, you just kind of need to say, okay, how much time can I dedicate to this? And then figure out what you can do, but make sure you're doing some every week so that you're, getting the benefit of it. Yeah. Another thing you can do is you can get on, just Google, get on the internet and see if there's any critique groups or writing groups in your area geographically. I know over the last year or 2, what with the pandemic and everything, a lot of those have been shut down.
Sure.
But that's another thing that I've done is we have the League of Utah Writers here. So I'm in Utah, and they have chapters everywhere. So, something like that is another way you can meet other writers in your area and maybe set up critique groups.
Oh, it's so good. There's so many tips. I can't wait to just write the show notes for this and make my own notes on the side. Thank you so much. This was so super valuable. Tell me where people, my audience, can find your podcast, your coaching stuff, all of the goodies about you.
Okay. So my website is authorlkhill.com. On the front page, there's 2 big buttons, one that says click here for authors or click here for readers. So just depending on what you want to do, that can take you to the right stuff. I have a Facebook group. It's called the Prolific Author Facebook group. And yeah, that's probably the most direct access to me because I post in there and I haven't done one in a while, but I do lives in there and presentations and things. So just search the Prolific Author on Facebook and the group should pop up for you. And then my podcast is the Prolific Author Podcast, and it's pretty much on any podcatcher you can think of, iTunes, Android, Spotify, just search for it.
Yeah. Yeah. And the podcast is so good, you guys. If you want to be a writer, I highly recommend listening to it. I love when you break down, plot points using movies. That it's just,
I'm going to do more of that. I've had people, requesting that because I haven't done one in a while, and they're like, no, just do one that's like a story and you break everything down. And I was like, okay, I can do that.
Yeah. I mean, because it's really made me think about the piece that I'm working on right now from that, character arc. Because I'm just telling myself the story. Isn't that what the Terry Pratchett, I think, has the quote that the first draft is just you telling yourself the story. So that's what the part of the process I'm in right now. And I'm like, just get it out and don't overthink that part. But your points are so valid and so necessary. And so I'm getting so much out of it. And I highly recommend to any of you listening that you guys check out her podcast as well. So good. So good.
Thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm signing up for all of your things. You have a lot of really helpful information to put out into the world. So thank you for doing what you do. And thank you for being here with me today.
Yeah. Thank you for having me. It was really fun.
Yeah, absolutely. I look forward to following you and keeping in touch and all that good stuff, Liesel. Thanks again.
Yeah, thanks.
All right, take care.
You too.
So that was mad helpful, right, you guys? If you want to write, this episode was so good. It was so full of really useful information for you. Absolutely stop what you're doing right this second and go subscribe to Liesel's podcast, The Prolific Author, because it's out of this world helpful. It will teach you so much about your craft and make you think about things that you might not be thinking about. At least that's what it has done for me. Also, you guys, be sure to subscribe to the show if you haven't already done so that you don't miss next week's episode about how to be more courageous, my favorite topic ever. And if you liked this episode and you like the show in general, I would be super, super grateful if you would leave me a review. Reviews help my podcast get found in the sea of other podcasts, helps move me up so it's more discoverable so that other people can get this message into their ears. Also, you can now drop a tip at the Buy Me a Coffee link in the show notes, if and only if you got some value out of this episode. Totally no crush. But I do really, really want you to come join me on the socials. Instagram and Facebook, I am at Your Creative Fairy Godmother. And I'm on YouTube now. I'll include that link if you want to see mine and my guests' beautiful, shining faces. Please join me over there and hit subscribe. And thank you again for being here with me today and for listening. I love you very much. Have a great day.